What's up, guys? It's TJ, your men's holistic health coach, here with you today. Today we're doing episode number 2 of a 3-part series on my Don't Sleep on Sleep series, where we're talking all about sleep and how to optimize it for your best health, for your best authentic self, and so you can embody genuine and true healing. And sleep is a huge part of that. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to go over today is all about Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. I also wanted to preface this video by saying if you haven't seen part number 1, go ahead and see that first before you watch this, so you have a better idea of what we're talking about and why sleep is so important in your life. Make sure to use critical thinking with everything I'm sharing and discard the things that you don't need, and of course keep and apply the things that you find very helpful from these videos. So let's get started. So to start this class off, I want to mention the fact that everything sleeps. Everything from unicellular life to kangaroos, everything in nature gets some type of deep rest. And so it's so important for us to remember that we are connected. We're one with Gaia. We're here with nature as beings, and it's important that we get sleep as well as everything else. And once we understand our part in nature, it's very helpful for us to live a good and a happy life. And so sleep can be very fulfilling for us. Now, when we lose sleep and we don't get enough sleep, then sleep really is lost. It's important for us to get sleep in the present moment. And we might have something called a sleep rebound, where when we only sleep 5 hours one night, we end up getting maybe 12 hours the next night, and so we try and catch up on our sleep. So there is some truth to the fact that we can catch up on sleep, but really it's most important to understand that we're going to try and get enough sleep each night as we go to bed and make it a priority every single night, so that way we can have enough sleep and have quality sleep, and we can have a better quality of life. Alright, so I had a client come to me, and he is in his mid-60s, and he was concerned because he didn't have much energy. And now, as I said in the last video, I always start with sleep with my clients. That's the first thing I look at. So when he came to me and it was mentioning his lack of stamina, his lack of energy, his lack of motivation, I asked him how much does he sleep, and he says about 5 to 6 hours a night. He said that was normal for him, and that is not much. And so the first session we had, we talked only about sleep, and I suggested to him that he start getting at least 7 hours, if not 8, maybe even 9 if you really can. Sure enough, within this first week, 2 weeks, he had plenty of energy, a ton of stamina. He went on to be going from being pre-diabetic to jacked. He's got gains, and he's easily working a side job, and he's doing all this in his mid-60s. And so if he can do it, of course you can too. And we can get so much more stamina, more energy, and more fulfillment out of life when we get enough sleep, when we get that rest that our body needs. And it's so much more fulfilling to us. And so I see an issue here where a lot of us in society, we think it's normal, especially as we get older, to only get 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And we see this as a cultural norm, but in reality we need more sleep than that, so we can have more energy and we can give our bodies more rest, more of the grace that it needs to be able to be ready for the day of awake activities. So let's talk about naps and why they're beneficial for us. So humans have what's called biphasic sleep cycles, which basically means that, of course, other than babies and newborns, that we as adults, we sleep through the night, and then we also have a period in the afternoon where our circadian rhythm dips down and we have a chance to take a nap. And so when we use an afternoon nap as something to help us to regenerate our energy and to be able to lie down for a little bit, that can be very helpful for us. I'm going to mention 2 studies here talking about benefits for the heart from naps. So in the first study here, I have a study where they study over 23,000 people. And in the span of 6 years, they concluded that regularly taking naps cut down the risk of heart disease by 37%. That's a big percentage jump, and so that's very helpful that we can see this, and we can take this information, apply it to our lives, and see that at least even taking an occasional after nap is going to be very, very beneficial for our hearts. Our hearts are very important. They pump all the blood 24/7 that we need, and so this is very, very important that we see sleep and its benefits for the heart. And then in the second study here, I have a study where they looked at people sleeping 6 hours or less every single night, so chronic sleep deprivation. And over the course of 10 to 15 years, they had a 23% increase of chance of getting coronary heart disease. And this is also very important because we can see how detrimental it can be when we don't get enough sleep, or kind of like the client I was talking about earlier, where not only was he lacking stamina and energy, but there's plenty of other things going on that was not going to be beneficial to his body in the short term or the long term. So you may have heard that blood pressure is the silent killer. And having high blood pressure chronically is not good for us. And sleep is very big with this because it helps us to have a period of the day where our blood pressure is lowered, and then our heart finally gets a chance to relax a little bit to get ready for the next day. And the more time we can have to keep it a little lower, then when it's higher, our heart is going to be more able to get it back down low again and have it at a steady, good rate for us to go about our activities, so not too low, not too high. And so we need a balance of having it lower, especially at night when we're asleep, so that way we can give our heart that rest, that chance it needs to get ready for the next day. Alright, so all psychiatric disorders have some type of correlation with a lack of sleep or some type of sleep disturbance. And now whether it's totally correlation or causation with psychiatric disorders, that's up for debate. And of course, it's also going to depend on the certain type of person. But I work in the mental health field, and I can definitely see that there's plenty of patients who, even at the hospital, they still have strange sleep patterns or sleep patterns that wouldn't be considered normal, and they don't sleep well at night, and thus it leads to issues during the day. And then of course, once they have issues during the day, or maybe they sleep too long during the day, then they can't sleep well at night, and so their circadian rhythm and everything is just completely off balance. And so it's very important to understand that all of us have a brain, all of us are prone to psychiatric disorders when we're not getting enough sleep or we have too many sleep disturbances. And it may not be causation, but of course this can add to, on top of other issues, to us maybe having a certain disorder or something going on in our brains that we don't want. And so sleep is also very beneficial from that perspective. And so let's talk about Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's affects a ton of people, and Alzheimer's is not a great thing to have, and I've seen it in my life with patients before. And so we can actually prevent Alzheimer's by getting enough sleep, especially deep sleep. So what happens with Alzheimer's is caused by a plaque that builds up in your brain called amyloid beta. Now amyloid beta is neurodegenerative, meaning it's gonna start leading to issues like Alzheimer's. And as this plaque builds up, it actually makes it harder for you to get enough deep sleep, leading to more buildup of the plaque. And so when we go into deep sleep or NREM sleep, we go through a process where our brain actually gets rid of all certain byproducts that happen during our waking hours, and so our brain's able to function better, and it gets rid of any toxic byproducts that we don't need. And so when we don't get enough deep sleep, this will actually increase our risk of getting Alzheimer's. And then of course, once we get Alzheimer's, it will actually make it harder for us to get enough sleep as well. Thankfully, there's a few things we can do to help prevent or even slow down the buildup of amyloid beta within our brains. One thing we can do is to consume cannabis. So cannabis has a chemical called THC. THC actually reduces the amount of amyloid beta within our neurons. And another thing we can do is to eat less processed food. So there's some evidence showing that processed food, which is usually tends to be higher on what's called the glycemic index, meaning that your body has to release more insulin, and your blood sugar levels are going to be higher when we take foods that are considered high on the glycemic index. And so when we eat less processed foods or foods that aren't as high on the glycemic index, that don't induce such a blood sugar spike, then that also helps prevent us from getting this amyloid beta building up within our brains. Another thing we can do is to exercise. Exercise has been proven and shown to be very great for reducing the amount of amyloid beta buildup that eventually leads to and causes Alzheimer's. So when we take afternoon naps, we tend to get more NREM sleep, and just like I said before, NREM sleep or deep sleep has its wonderful benefits, and so afternoon naps can be very, very great. Just make sure that you don't have them too long, because if you have them too long, it could end up affecting the sleep that you're going to get on in the night. And so what I would recommend is maybe setting a timer for like half an hour, and depending on how much sleep you really need, maybe half an hour is great, and you just get that half-hour nap, or maybe 1 hour if you got less sleep the night before. Really, it's up to you to experiment to find out what's going to be best for you. All I suggest is don't take too long of an afternoon nap, because it may affect your sleep later on. So speaking of cannabis, let's talk about the three main and the most common substances that people ingest. That's going to be caffeine, that's going to be cannabis, and that's going to be alcohol. I'll start with cannabis first. So cannabis actually can help us to sleep, and not only to sleep a better quality, but have longer sleep. It also helps us to be able to sleep quicker, because CBD, a chemical in cannabis, helps us to lower our body temperature so we're able to sleep better. And THC also decreases REM sleep. So this is important to note that although cannabis can be helpful in some ways, it can also be detrimental in other ways, because we need a sufficient amount of REM sleep in our nights to have a good quality of sleep. And maybe you fall in the category of someone who only gets 5 hours of sleep no matter what you do, and you need something to help you. Maybe cannabis is what you need to help you to get a little more sleep. But just realize that one of the effects of that is less REM sleep. But of course, sometimes life is choosing the lesser of two evils, and if you're down to not sleeping at all or not getting enough REM sleep, then you might need cannabis if you can't get enough sleep in general. Alright, the next substance I want to discuss is caffeine. So caffeine is one of the most commonly used stimulants in the world. You likely might be a regular caffeine consumer, so let's talk about it. So caffeine actually has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours, which means that it has a full life of around 10 to 14 hours. Now that's a good bit of time for your body to have to break that down within itself. And so when we ingest caffeine, it's going to be better to drink or eat it sooner in the day, earlier in the day, and that way we can be sure it's not going to affect us for our sleep that night. And so what caffeine does is it actually just binds to our receptors for adenosine. So we talked about adenosine in the last episode, but to give you a quick review, adenosine is a molecule that builds up in your body, and the levels of it get higher and higher throughout the day. It's basically like a sleep timer that as you get more of it, you feel more sleepy, and then you eventually go to sleep. So all caffeine does, it doesn't necessarily give you more energy, it just blocks those, I said binds earlier, but actually just blocks those receptors. And so that way you don't feel as tired. And so with caffeine, we want to make sure that we are ingesting it early, and that we also recognize that it's going to have this half-life and this full life that we should be aware of. So that way we're going to know if, for example, if we want to go to sleep by 7 p.m., then we probably don't want to be ingesting it at 3 p.m. or 1 p.m. It's going to be better to ingest it earlier in the day. So just like cannabis, alcohol decreases REM sleep, except alcohol only decreases it in the first part of the night, which at first you might go, oh good, that's great. But what happens is the REM sleep tries to bounce back in the second half of the night, and our body's trying to get enough. But when it does this, it actually also decreases the amount of deep sleep that we get, thus decreasing REM and deep sleep. And so this is definitely unhelpful for us when we're trying to get adequate amounts of sleep and the different types of sleep that we need throughout the night. And so of course, drinking less or minimizing alcohol is going to be best for our sleep quality. So as we age, we gradually lose the amounts of deep sleep that we get, we lose the strength of our circadian rhythms, and we also end up losing the levels of melatonin that builds up within our bodies. And so melatonin is a chemical, a molecule that is synthesized in our bodies that helps us to signal our bodies of when to sleep and when to start getting tired, and it gets things ready for our bodies to have adequate and quality sleep. And so let's talk about some things we can do to help with all these things. So one thing I mentioned in the last video, I'll mention one more time, is it's important to get sunlight right at the beginning when we wake up in the morning. This is actually going to prime us for being able to go to sleep better at night, because it's getting us started into our circadian rhythm very well. Also, getting adequate amounts of sunlight during the day is also going to help us to be able to get adequate amounts of sleep during the night. Now let's talk about supplements. So supplements such as melatonin are wonderful, but it's very important that we find quality melatonin, because there's a lot of melatonin supplements out there, and the quantity of actual melatonin that's in the supplement can be very off depending on what brand you're getting or whatever it is, if it's not a very quality supplement. So make sure you're getting good melatonin that can really help you. Another supplement I'm going to recommend is magnesium. Most Americans are actually deficient in magnesium, so we need to make sure we get enough. And magnesium not only helps us sleep, it also helps our blood pressure. When something can help our blood pressure, this can have great benefits for us in all sorts of areas, but especially with our sleep. So make sure you get enough magnesium. A form of magnesium that I take that's been very helpful is magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycinate is easily absorbed in the gut, and it can be very helpful for you to make sure that you have adequate levels of it going through you. So melatonin, magnesium, these are two great supplements I would recommend starting out with and taking that can help you and help you to benefit from your sleep. Another thing I could recommend is brain stimulation. So brain stimulation is a process where they hook up electrodes and they help stimulate your brain to be able to produce the right brain waves so that you're able to get adequate sleep quality. And this has to be something that's done by licensed professionals with up-to-date technology, and make sure they have a lot of good credibility. so that way you don't have issues with it not working or doing worse, because there has been reports of brain stimulators that actually end up putting burns in your head because people aren't doing it with actual professionals or people that know what they're doing. So make sure to be careful with that and to get a good brain stimulation program going. So 2 final things I want to discuss before we close this video is that getting enough sleep is going to be very beneficial for our memory, and it's also going to be very beneficial for our ability to regulate our emotions. And so with our memory, what is going on in our brains, and I spoke about this in the last video, I'll say it again though, is that when we get it, especially in REM sleep, our hippocampus is able to integrate our memories with our dreams, and then our memories are able to move from our hippocampus to our neocortex, or the outer part of our brain. So we're able to keep those memories, especially the ones that are actually applicable to life and very useful. Our brains are also able to forget what we don't need. So really, sleep is a process which we can go through where we're able to organize our memories, keep what we really need, what's important and applicable, and then let go of the rest of what we don't need. So sleep is very, very important for having a good memory. And then of course emotional regulation is super important, because I'm big on embodiment of positive, expansive, amazing emotions, and this can be helped a ton when we get good sleep and good quality sleep. And so we want to make sure that we're getting sleep for all the benefits here, because there's so many great benefits, and it's very, very important that we have sleep a part of our lives so we can feel the best that we can feel, and we can be embodying those positive expansive emotions. Sleep is important for emotional regulation because the part of our brain called our prefrontal cortex, so basically our place where we can critically think and rationalize things, when we get enough sleep, our prefrontal cortex is well rested and it can be used optimally. And then our called amygdala, so basically the part of our brain that is our helps out with our stress response and initiates fear or anger or frustration, then when it gets enough sleep, it's also able to manage itself and to regulate. And so when we have a good working prefrontal cortex, a good working amygdala, or amygdalas, there's 2 of them, then when we're able to have this all working great, then we're going to feel great, we're going to feel better, we're going to be able to embody wonderful, positive, expansive emotions. So alright guys, there was my second class on Don't Sleep on Sleep. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things to get me on the algorithm so I can help more people and more people can benefit from this information. And speaking of emotions, if you want to learn more about emotions and regulating your emotions and being a more positive embodied man, then you can buy my book. I'll have the link in the description below. It's only $4.99, and it's going to talk a lot about emotions, how to regulate them, how to feel what you're really feeling, because let's be real, most men aren't taught how to know what they're feeling or how to even express it, especially in a healthy way. This book talks all about that. Super brief, 20 pages. Alright guys, well, have a good day and love you lots.